Chapter 173. After returning from the Cemetery of Death, Han Shuo immediately discovered Emily standing beside the transportation matrix as soon as he appeared in the secret room. "Have you seen your little lover?" Emily immediately asked when she saw Han Shuo. "Phoebe doesn't know anything about the siege equipment that Bob Asher requested. I've also told her that she will cooperate fully with us. I think we can cover up the matter that implicated Phoebe this time." Han Shuo put away the 6 magic wands one by one as he walked out of the transportation matrix and explained to Emily. "If Phoebe really doesn't know anything, then this matter won't implicate her. Our dark mantle will never wrongly accuse an innocent person. You'll know this in the future." Emily said seriously, then giggled and said, "You ran into her room in the middle of the night. Did she think you were a thief who stole a perfume and beat you up?" "Of course not." Han Shuo responded with a natural expression. Emily looked at Han Shuo a few times, trying to glean something from his expression, but discovered that Han Shuo's expression was calm and didn't change at all. Alright, that's it for now. I've just received news that Belinda, who you let go, is contacting you through your method. I don't know what she wants." Emily discovered that she couldn't glean anything from Han Shuo's expression, so she didn't say anything else and went straight to business. Han Shuo had left behind a method for Belinda to contact him before she left. Han Shuo had also told this method to Emily so that Emily could keep an eye out for him. Now that he heard her say this, he immediately said, "All right, then let's go see Belinda and see what she wants from me." Han Shuo and Emily walked side by side in the desolate forest where Han Shuo had killed 2 members of the Griffin Legion. Although he'd already left a backup plan on Belinda's body, Han Shuo was still quite cautious. He was extremely focused when he walked over, deathly afraid that he'd fall into Belinda's trap. When Han Shuo entered the forest, he suddenly sensed an enormous presence hidden within. This energy obviously didn't come from Belinda. Han Shuo immediately focused his consciousness and said softly to Emily, "Be careful, there's something unusual in there." Nodding, Emily said, "Yes, it looks like Belinda isn't the only one inside. We should be careful in case Belinda ambushes us." "Don't worry, if Belinda really dares to act against us, I'll make sure she's in for it." Han Shuo's expression was calm as he took out the Demon's Lair edge from his space ring and walked into the depths of the forest. Suddenly, a dazzling bolt of lightning shot out from the depths of the dense forest like a dragon swimming in the void. This bolt of lightning was as thick as an arm as it snaked through the air and exploded with dazzling light. The trees on the side creaked as it made its way over, giving rise to thick smoke. Frowning, the Demon's Lair edge shot out according to Han Shuo's will, leaping over several trees in its way and stabbing towards the incoming bolt of lightning. A series of crackling sounds rang out as Han Shuo's Demon's Lair edge sensed the surging fighting aura. This kind of fighting aura was mixed with the power of thunder and lightning, appearing extremely violent and ferocious. Even though Han Shuo had infused the Demon's Lair edge with magical yuan, it still couldn't withstand it for long. Han Shuo felt that something was amiss in that moment of contact and hurriedly directed the Demon's Lair edge to fly back into his palm. "Who's there?" Emily was also very cautious at this moment. She held her magic staff and stared at the bolt of lightning in the air as she shouted in her delicate voice. "Thunder Magus Swordsman Johnny of the Calamity Church, I just want to see if you have the right to cooperate with us." A low voice suddenly sounded from the depths of the forest. A middle-aged man in black armor with silver curly hair walked out from the depths of the forest with Belinda after the voice sounded. This middle-aged man had an ugly, slanted scar from his left eye to his nose, making his already ugly face look even more ferocious. The moment he appeared from the dense forest, his voice had just sounded when his body swiftly flew to the area where the lightning was swimming in the empty space. He extended his hairy right hand and a milky white dou qi instantly flashed. The lightning that was swimming in the empty space seemed to be pulled by a great force and landed in his palm. When the power of thunder and lightning receded, Han Shuo discovered that it was a slender silver longsword. However, the power of thunder and lightning still lingered on the hilt, flashing from time to time. The milky white fighting aura meant that this person had the strength of a swordmaster or earth knight. With this kind of strength and lightning magic, It was no wonder that this person was so strong. Even Han Shua's Demon's Lair edge couldn't gain the upper hand against him. The veiled Belinda slowly walked out from behind the Thunder Magus swordsman Johnny. She first apologized when she arrived in front of Han Shua and then said to Johnny, "Uncle Johnny, I've already told you that their strength is enough to cooperate with us. Otherwise, how would I have failed?" Although this person from the Calamity Church called Johnny seemed to be an arrogant person, he still seemed to respect Belinda. He couldn't help but nod when he heard her say this. Their strength is passable, but what help can they provide us if we cooperate with them? Bob Asher of the Griffin Legion is a Sky Knight. With his strength, these two won't be able to deal with him at all. Only by using your golem to block the others and I'll have the chance to kill him. Emily couldn't help but say when she saw that this person was so arrogant. Apart from Bob Asher being a Sky Knight in the Griffin Legion, there are 5 Earth Knights who follow him all year round. Add to that Clark's Master, Great Swordmaster Gabriel, and 2 Archmages of the Earth and Water elements. Just based on this strength alone, it'll be a fool's dream if anyone wants to kill him alone unless a Sacred Swordmaster, Sacred Magus, or a Sacred Knight personally makes a move. Heh. Although Mr. Johnny is a Thunder Magus swordsman, it won't be easy for you to defeat Bob Asher himself in a real battle, not to mention his followers. Most people would know about Bob Asher's followers, but they couldn't be like the Dark Mantle, knowing so much about every expert by Bob Asher's side. When Emily described Bob Asher's followers in such detail, even the arrogant Thunder Magus swordsman Johnny's expression changed greatly and he appeared a bit shocked. "Then what help can you give us?" Johnny asked Emily after a moment of silence with a stoic face. "No matter what goals you have against Bob Asher, I only want to tell you not to act rashly. Otherwise, it won't just be you, but even we will be dragged into this mess. If we work together, I can provide you with detailed information on the people around Bob Asher. This will help you find out where he usually goes and even help you send his followers away in a short amount of time, creating a suitable opportunity for you to assassinate him." Emily revealed a confident smile as she slowly described the things that the Dark Mantle could do for Johnny. "Uncle Johnny, this is exactly what we need." Belinda suddenly spoke up at this moment. "I think you're from the Lancelot Empire?" Johnny wasn't an idiot and naturally guessed the identities of Han Shua and Emily. Nodding, Emily admitted frankly, "That's right, I hope that you'll keep this a secret for us if we work together." You people are the most hypocritical. You'll work with us when you need us, but you'll turn your back on us when things are over and use all your power to attack our church." Johnny mocked with extreme disdain when he heard Emily's words. "Since that's the case, then this matter is settled. We'll find a suitable opportunity to assassinate Bob Asher in the next 2 days and let you know when we've made the arrangements. You can also take the opportunity to find more reinforcements. Otherwise, it's not very realistic to kill Bob Asher." One could tell from Johnny's expression that although he didn't like serving the country, he seemed to be used to making use of each other. That was why Han Shua had said this. Judging from the Calamity Church's current display of strength, it wasn't very likely that they would be able to assassinate Bob Asher. Han Shua and Emily had agreed to work with them not because they hoped to kill Bob Asher, but because they hoped to obtain the information they needed from Bob Asher's manor during the chaos and then use the Dark Mantle's abilities to take him down. "Alright, then this matter is settled. I hope that you two don't try any tricks, or you'll regret it." Johnny finally agreed with a darkened face. Chapter 174. After leaving the dense forest, Han Shua and Emily split up, heading to Lawrence's new residence alone. When Han Shua arrived and saw Lawrence, he heard Lawrence thank him. "Thank you so much for last time. Otherwise, Lisa might have been in danger." "You're welcome. With my relationship with Lisa, these are things that I should do." "Right, how is Lisa now?" Han Shua asked Lawrence with a smile after sitting down. "Don't worry, I've already sent someone to send her back to Asen City. As strong as the Griffin Legion is, they wouldn't dare act wildly in the capital." "That's great. Right? Your junior sister Phoebe is also in Valen City right now. She has some dealings with the Griffin Legion." Han Shua started talking about Phoebe after thinking for a moment. Surprise appeared on his face. Lawrence was quite surprised and asked Han Shua in confusion, Why is she in Valen City? What's going on? Because of his previous understanding, Han Shuo discovered that Lawrence and Phoebe had a good relationship. As the third prince, it would be safer for him to know what Phoebe had done first. Therefore, after Lawrence asked, Han Shuo roughly explained what had happened. When Han Shuo finished speaking, Lawrence furrowed his brow and was silent for a while. He looked deeply at Han Shuo and said, "It looks like the matter of Phoebe this time is all thanks to you. Your dark mantle is truly resourceful." Han Shuo started when he heard these words and focused his eyes on Lawrence. After looking deeply at him for a while, Han Shuo exhaled lightly and said to Lawrence, "When did you learn of my identity?" "Since the last time we left the slave trading house." Lawrence responded with a slight smile and hesitated before saying, "To be precise, I only learned of your identity now. After leaving the slave trading house last time, I began to suspect Madame Emily's background. I only understood Madame Emily's identity after I found someone to confirm it in detail, and then began to suspect you. There was nothing dishonorable about working for the Dark Mantle. The existence of the Dark Mantle wasn't a secret amongst the senior executives of the Empire. Their duties and actions wouldn't harm the interests of ordinary people unless they did something harmful to the Empire. Otherwise, the existence of the Dark Mantle would even protect ordinary people. Han Shuo didn't feel that there was anything wrong with this. Musing for a moment, Han Shuo's expression was the same as usual as he smiled. "Not bad, I've just joined the Dark Mantle not long ago, but I do deeply understand how resourceful the Dark Mantle is." "Then, you should know me quite well by now?" Lawrence suddenly looked at Han Shuo with a faint smile on his face. Starting, Han Shuo laughed heartily. "Of course, you're the son of the finance minister, Lawrence. Everyone knows this." Even though Han Shuo was well aware of the third prince's identity, he couldn't say it out loud. Otherwise, his relationship with Lawrence would likely change. At the very least, Lawrence would probe Han Shuo's thoughts and perhaps invite Han Shuo to work for him. This was a difficult problem that Han Shuo wasn't willing to face at the moment, so playing dumb was the wisest course of action. An odd smile appeared on Lawrence's face when he heard Han Shuo's words. He looked deeply at Han Shuo for a while before responding, "All right, let's not talk about this for now. Your Dark Mantle must have come to Valen City this time because you understand that Bob Asher has intentions of rebelling. That's why you've come to gather evidence. My goal in coming here can be said to be the same as yours, to bring down this Griffin Legion commander. Can you tell me how your progress is right now?" Han Shuo was a bit hesitant when he heard Lawrence's question. He quickly weighed the pros and cons in his mind before saying that he wanted to obtain evidence of the siege equipment and hand it over to the senior executives of the Dark Mantle so that they could officially arrest Bob Asher. However, Han Shuo didn't say a word about the matter of allying with the Calamity Church. He didn't want Lawrence to know about this. "Since our goals are the same, then I think we can work together. What plans do you have? How can I help you?" Lawrence asked Han Shuo. Han Shuo couldn't help but sweep his eyes over Lawrence when he heard these words. He asked, "Then what can you help us with?" Smiling slightly mysteriously, Lawrence looked deeply at Han Shuo and said, "I have someone in the Griffin Legion. This person's position is second only to Bob Asher. This person can directly mobilize the Griffin Legion at certain times and do many things for us." Han Shuo's mind spun furiously as he learned a lot of useful information from Lawrence's words. It looked like Lawrence's trip to Valen City this time wasn't as simple as dealing with Bob Asher. It was likely that he'd topple Asher and support his own people to take over the Griffin Legion. This was all in preparation for his future fight for the throne. That would be best. "I need to make some plans. There will be a move in the next 2 days. I'll let you know when the time comes and discuss with you how to cooperate." Han Shuo thought for a moment and said to Lawrence, "No problem, I'll wait for your good news." "Haha, we can be considered friends now. I'm quite confident in your way of doing things. I know that you're cautious enough and that there shouldn't be any major slip-ups after you've carefully thought through your preparations. Let me know when you've settled everything and I'll do my best to cooperate with you. We'll be mutually beneficial." Lawrence laughed heartily and said straightforwardly, "All right then, I'll take my leave now." Han Shuo said his goodbyes and left Lawrence's new residence, heading for Elaine's hotel not too far away. When Han Shuo arrived at the hotel, he discovered that the damaged room that Belinda had been staying in had been more or less repaired. It looked like it would be ready to be used again in a short period of time. Han Shuo and Emily's room hadn't been checked out yet. Therefore, Han Shuo returned to the room after arriving at the hotel. The fat middle-aged woman, Elaine, walked in after a short while. She closed the door and said with a smile, "I have to thank you for your help. Otherwise, my hotel would have been destroyed by that calamity churchwoman." "It looks like Emily has already told you everything that happened," Han Shuo said. Nodding, the owner of the hotel called Elaine said, "Yes, Madam Emily came by once and told me everything that had happened. She also told me to keep an eye on the guests here. What other instructions do you have for me this time? Have the guests in the hotel left yet? Has the female mage swordsman from the mercenary band made contact with anyone else?" Han Shuo thought of his agreement with Phoebe and couldn't help but ask. "There haven't been any changes to the guests here. The great druid and that little female elf are still temporarily staying in the hotel. The two went out during the day and returned not long ago. Apart from the woman called Candace, the others from the mercenary band have all gone out for a while. They seem to be searching for new missions and haven't returned yet. I've observed and haven't seen anyone suspicious enter Candace's room, nor have I seen her leave. Apart from that, there's nothing out of the ordinary in the hotel. The Griffin Legion sent someone to inspect once and asked about the collapse of the building, but I brushed it off. Elaine didn't seem to affect her at all when she saw what had happened in the hotel. Her expression was relaxed as she slowly narrated what had happened to Han Shuo in great detail. The Griffin Legion won't be suspicious of this place, will they? Han Shuo asked with furrowed brow after a moment's thought. Don't worry, I think there shouldn't be any problems. I've been in Valen City for many years and I've already made arrangements with the Griffin Legion a long time ago. Elaine assured Han Shuo with great confidence. Han Shuo couldn't say anything else after her words, otherwise it would appear that he didn't trust her. Nodding, Han Shuo said, "You've worked hard." He then motioned for Elaine to go about her own business. After Elaine left, Han Shuo thought for a moment and decided to tell her that Phoebe might be coming to find Candace, in case she suddenly left the hotel. As he walked out of his room, Han Shuo pondered on how to break the news to Candace as he walked towards her room. He suddenly heard "Big Bad Guy" on the way, and then saw the little elf Angelica pointing excitedly at him from the window of Caspian's room. Smiling wryly and making a fierce face at Angelica, Han Shuo ignored her and continued walking towards Candace's room. However, Han Shuo heard footsteps coming from Angelica's direction. It was obvious that the little elf Angelica had caught up to him. "Big Bad Guy, what are you doing here?" The little elf Angelica had rushed out in the blink of an eye and looked at Han Shuo with a bit of joy. "I've come out to kidnap a little girl like you." Han Shuo blinked and chuckled evilly. Chapter 175. You think you can trick me? I don't believe it. Angelica was quite disdainful as she pouted and wrinkled her delicate nose. It's up to you whether you believe it or not. All right, I still have things to do. Go do what you need to do. Saying this with a smile, Han Shuo didn't pay any attention to Angelica and planned on going to Candace's room. At this moment, the door creaked open from the room that Angelica had run out from. The great druid Caspian walked out and only glanced at Han Shuo before exclaiming in surprise, "How can it be you?" Nodding at Caspian in a friendly manner with a smile, Han Shuo bowed. "Greetings, great druid elder Caspian. I met you last time in the dark forest with Trunks. You know my grandfather as well?" Angelica was quite surprised to see Han Shuo greet Caspian. She looked at her grandfather and then looked at Han Shuo. Han Shuo smiled and was about to respond when Caspian's eyes lit up. He looked over Han Shuo's body and a thoughtful smile suddenly appeared on his face. "So it's you. But we should have met recently, heh?" Although Han Shuo had been wearing a black hood not too long ago, his physique and voice hadn't been concealed. In addition, Han Shuo had called out Caspian's name when things had concluded. Based on these three flaws, it wasn't strange that Caspian would quickly recognize Han Shuo when he saw Han Shuo again. Han Shuo didn't argue or explain anything with regards to Caspian's words. He flashed a meaningful smile at Caspian and said, "I have some matters to attend to, goodbye. Little Angelica, don't disturb other people's business. Hurry and come back to the room with me." Caspian nodded knowingly and grabbed the little elf, planning on leaving with Angelica. Candace, who'd heard Han Shuo's words, just happened to open the door at this moment. She looked at Han Shuo and then at Caspian, who was talking to Han Shuo with surprise. She nodded at the two in a friendly manner and finally said to Han Shuo, "You've come to find me? Sister Candace, I've come to look for you as well. Let me go in as well." Angelica called out sweetly to Candace, "If our cute little elf really has something to do, then I'll come find you later. But I have some matters to attend to right now." Candace laughed lightly and opened the door. She leaned to the side and said to Han Shuo, "Come in. All right, stop messing around. Come back to my room and continue practicing magic." The druid Caspian glared at Angelica reproachfully and pulled her back. Candace closed the door tightly after Han Shuo entered Candace's room. She then seemed to think of something and suddenly looked at Han Shuo. "You were the one who saved us last night?" Han Shuo didn't need to deny anything about this and nodded. "This matter is a bit complicated. Has Belinda, who hired you, paid your commission?" Shaking her head with a wry smile, Candace said, "She's from the Calamity Church. This church has always done things in an evil and sinister manner. I'm already very lucky that nothing happened to me. How could I have received a commission? Promise me one thing. Don't try to make trouble for Belinda. You won't get anything out of this. As for the commission she paid you this time, I'll help you get it back." Han Shuo thought for a moment and stared at Candace. Candace was a bit taken aback when she heard these words and looked at Han Shuo in confusion. "I heard from Caspian that you and a woman took Belinda away. Just who are you? Since you've captured Belinda, why would you say that?" "This matter is a bit complicated. I'll explain it to you when Phoebe gets here. But don't think about doing anything to Belinda, because I know the strength she holds. She's not someone that your Battlefire mercenary band can handle." Although Han Shuo hadn't known Candace for long, he knew that she wasn't the type to give up easily. He also understood that even if she knew that her life was in danger, she would still do it if she set her mind on something. This was why he was trying to persuade her. "But why is Phoebe here as well?" Candace first cried out in surprise and then said to Han Shuo with a resolute expression, "You're a bit too late. I've already arranged for the others to search for Belinda's tracks. The Mercenary Association should bear our losses now that something has happened to our employer. I'll deal with Belinda myself. I'm begging you, sister. Let Belinda go for now. This woman is in my hands right now and I need her to do some things. Can you give me some face?" For a woman as unreasonable as Candace, the more he told her that there was great danger, the more stubborn she would become. With no other choice, Han Shuo could only use this method to convince her. Candace was no longer so insistent after hearing Han Shuo's words. Her bright, resolute eyes stared at Han Shuo for a while before she nodded reluctantly. "Since you're begging me so, then all right, I promise you that I won't pursue this matter any further. However, Belinda must give us the commission she's due, otherwise I won't be able to answer to the captain." No problem at all. I'll have Belinda pay up in the next 2 days after I've interrogated her." Han Shuo hastened to agree when he saw that Candace had loosened up. As Han Shuo and Candace spoke, the sound of their footsteps approached from the outside. Han Shuo then heard the owner of the hotel, Elaine's voice. "This room is where Miss Candace lives." "Thank you very much." Phoebe's cold, proud voice sounded from outside at this moment. A look of pleasant surprise appeared on Candace's face as she shot to her feet, quickly walking to open the door. When the door opened, Phoebe, dressed in an elegant dress, had a noble, aloof expression on her face. However, the coldness on her face faded as soon as she saw Candace. A radiant smile appeared on her face as she cried out in surprise, "Candace, you're really here. Not only me, there's also someone inside that you must want to see." Candace laughed heartily and moved to the side to let Phoebe walk in. At the door, Elaine took advantage of this short moment to change her position and poke her head in for a peek. She was quite surprised when she saw that Han Shuo was inside, but Phoebe had already walked in at this moment and the door was closed by Candace. After last night's romantic entanglement, Phoebe's beautiful face immediately flushed red when she saw Han Shuo again. Perhaps it was because Candace was right next to her, but Phoebe's body was a bit shy and unnatural. She didn't even dare look at Han Shuo too much, and only snuck a glance at Han Shuo after she'd arrived. She then minded her own business and caught up with Candace, her large, bright eyes watching Han Shuo out of the corner of her eye. Han Shuo felt a bit awkward when he saw Phoebe this time because there was an outsider present. However, his skin was thick to begin with and he wasn't too affected. He still sat there drinking tea with a straight face, his expression rather natural. The two women chatted for a while, briefly recounting their experiences after they'd left last time. They both focused their conversation on what had happened in Valen City. Because the two had both met Han Shuo naturally became the main topic of discussion. "Tell me, why did you come to Valen City this time, and why do you know where I live? Also, Candace said that you were with a woman, what's all this about?" After Phoebe and Candace had discussed for a while, Phoebe finally looked at Han Shuo and asked Han Shuo. Candace was also quite astonished and added, "Belinda is a member of the Calamity Church and shouldn't have any relationship with you. Why would you capture her and use her to do something? Just who are you?" The two women had a belly full of questions and looked at Han Shuo, trying to get Han Shuo to give a reasonable explanation. Although Han Shuo already had a plan in mind, it was still a bit of a headache when he really had to explain. However, this matter wasn't something that could be easily brushed aside because some matters were a bit complicated. Han Shuo's brow furrowed at this moment. He coughed lightly when he heard that someone was coming in and made a gesture for the two to be silent. The sound of footsteps grew closer and the door was knocked lightly. Emily's gentle voice traveled in from outside, "I know you're all inside. May I come in?" Phoebe and Candace looked at Han Shuo suspiciously and asked at the same time, "Who is she?" "She's the woman you've been asking about." Han Shuo smiled wryly. He hadn't thought that Emily would want to butt in at this time. If it had been yesterday, when Han Shuo hadn't been intimate with Phoebe, Han Shuo wouldn't have been afraid of the two of them meeting. But now, Han Shuo's head was swelling as he racked his brain over how to handle the relationship between the two. Chapter 176. Why have you come? Unsure of Emily's intentions, although Han Shuo's expression was normal, his heart was a mess. He smiled apologetically at Emily. "I've only come to discuss with you how we should deal with the chief of the Griffin Legion." It was unknown whether or not Emily was doing this on purpose, but she didn't even glance at Han Shuo after entering. She only looked at Phoebe and Candace as they spoke. "Aren't you Madam Emily? Why do you know Brian? What's going on?" Phoebe's interest in the relationship between Emily and Han Shuo was obviously far greater than dealing with the Griffin Legion. She couldn't help but ask when she saw that the person who'd come was Emily. Phoebe sneaked a glance at Han Shuo after speaking and walked towards Han Shuo with a flushed face. She even reached out her slender, jade hands to hold onto Han Shuo's arm, raising her head in a show of force at Emily. If it had been yesterday, Han Shuo could have disregarded Phoebe's face and explained that the relationship between the two was just an act. But after last night's romantic entanglement, there was no way he could explain anything now. He could only smile awkwardly at Emily without saying a word. A complicated luster flickered in Emily's eyes as she looked deeply at Han Shuo. Han Shuo felt a strong sense of guilt in his heart after staring at her for a while. His expression hardened as he took a deep breath and said to Phoebe, "Actually, my relationship with Emily is, we're both superiors and subordinates of the Dark Mantle. We've only taken on the same mission at the same time this time. Miss Phoebe need not take it to heart." Just as Han Shuo was about to explain, Emily had been closely watching Han Shuo's expression and suddenly interrupted Han Shuo's following words, glossing over what Han Shuo had been about to say. Han Shuo was flabbergasted. He didn't understand why Emily would say this. When he looked at Emily with surprise, he found that Emily was giving him a gratified smile. It was as if Emily only needed Han Shua's true approval from the bottom of his heart. It was as if Han Shua's decision was what she wanted. It wasn't to compete with Phoebe for undeserved fame and the pleasure of a moment. Phoebe felt a bit awkward after hearing Emily's words. It was as if she was being petty. It was a good thing that Phoebe was also a strong woman in charge of a large firm. After only a moment of awkwardness, Phoebe immediately put down Han Shua and walked leisurely to Emily's side. She bowed slightly and said apologetically, "I'm sorry, Sister Emily, I was overthinking things. With your identity and status, you naturally wouldn't take a liking to a scoundrel like him." Emily deeply agreed with Phoebe's way of cursing Han Shua as a scoundrel. However, Emily sighed slightly in her heart and thought to herself, "I just had to board this scoundrel's pirate ship and now I can't extricate myself. It's impossible for me to like a rude and disrespectful fellow like him. Besides, I'm already married, so it's even more impossible. Don't let your imagination run wild." Emily sighed lightly in her heart, but still wore a smile on her face as she comforted Phoebe. "I'd long since noticed that this fellow was always secretive. So he's from the Empire's dark mantle. We should have guessed long ago." Candace looked at Han Shua with interest and said with a light smile. Contrary to Han Shua's expectations, both Phoebe and Candace didn't seem surprised at all after his identity had been exposed by Emily. It was as if Han Shua's actions had long since been taken for granted by them that he was from a secret organization. Emily's revelation seemed to only help them confirm the suspicions in their hearts. "That's what I said, he's always been secretive. As a student of the necromancy major, he often does strange things. So he has another identity as a member of the Dark Mantle. This completely explains his strange actions in the past." Phoebe chuckled lightly and rolled her eyes at Han Shua from afar on Emily's side, as if blaming Han Shua for keeping secrets from her. Shrugging, Han Shua said, "All right, I think now isn't the time to talk about these things. How to help Phoebe extricate herself from this matter and take down Griffin Legion Chief Bob Asher should be our top priority right now." The two girls finally stopped discussing Han Shua's identity after hearing Han Shua's words. Because Emily didn't know how much Han Shua had told the two girls, it was still Han Shua who explained things to the two girls this time. "My senior brother Lawrence is also in Valen City?" Phoebe was a bit surprised when Han Shua mentioned Lawrence's existence and exclaimed softly. Nodding, Han Shua said, "That's right, Lawrence will also help us in this matter. He originally came to Valen City because of his cousin Lisa's family. What happened to Lisa's family was completely caused by the chief of the Griffin Legion. Lawrence wants to take revenge for Lisa's family, so he will do his best to help us." Han Shua had understood Lawrence's purpose in coming after their last conversation. It wasn't just to save Lisa, but to eliminate the chief of the Griffin Legion and support his own people in the position of chief. However, Han Shua couldn't say much to the two girls due to Lawrence's identity, so he could only say that he was only willing to help because of Lisa. "I've already done as you requested and secretly dripped a drop of blood onto one of the siege weapons. We were escorted all the way to a place in the west of the city before being taken away by the soldiers of the Griffin Legion. I think that the Griffin Legion's weapons storehouse must be there. We can look there." Phoebe narrated her actions after leaving Han Shua after Han Shua had finished speaking. "Very good, the Griffin Legion's weapons storehouse is indeed there. I'll be able to ascertain the direction after making a trip there. As long as we obtain the records of the Griffin Legion's purchase of this batch of siege weapons and report it to our superiors, we'll be able to catch Bob Asher red-handed for the crime of treason." Han Shua was overjoyed when he heard Phoebe's words. Han Shua and the three girls discussed for a while after he'd spoken. They used a mission as an excuse to leave with Emily. Candace frowned when Han Shua and Emily had just walked out of the room. "I keep feeling that his relationship with Madame Emily isn't quite right. The tone of their conversation seems a bit too intimate." "Heh, don't overthink things. Madame Emily is a widow and a member of the Betteridge family. Nothing will happen to her." Phoebe had a blissful smile on her face as she comforted Candace. "Oh right, you two haven't really put on an act, have you? Otherwise, you wouldn't have such an expression." Candace suddenly exclaimed softly in surprise when she saw Phoebe's expression of a little girl immersed in love and happiness. Phoebe's face became even redder when she heard Candace's question. She said bashfully, Last night we already— My gosh, Phoebe, you're too open. You slept with him so quickly? Candace's red lips parted and she couldn't help but cry out before Phoebe had finished speaking. What nonsense are you spouting? We only confirmed our relationship last night. Phoebe's face was flushed red with embarrassment as she cursed Candace lowly and hurriedly defended herself. I think it's not just confirmed our relationship, there's something else you're hiding from your expression. Hurry up and tell me the truth. Candace watched Phoebe attentively and immediately closed in on Phoebe with a face full of gossip after she'd finished speaking, viciously demanding that Phoebe explain everything. Han Shuo and Emily didn't immediately go on their mission after leaving Candace's room, but instead walked towards Emily's room together with tacit understanding. After the two entered the room and closed the door, Han Shuo casually pulled Emily into his arms and asked softly, Why? I only need to know that you have me in your heart. That's enough. I'm much older than you, and I also have the status of the Betteridge family's daughter-in-law. If you try to expose our relationship, it will have a great impact on both you and me. Emily snuggled into Han Shuo's arms and sighed softly, speaking of her difficulties. Before Han Shuo's strength was strong enough, it would indeed have a great impact if their relationship was exposed, especially to Emily. This was especially true for Emily. Not only would it affect her brother's career, it would also be an ugly blow to the Betteridge family. Therefore, Emily could only lament and feel sorry for herself, but there was nothing she could do. Phoebe is a good girl. Although her birth isn't noble, at least she's clean and has no fetters. You should be with her. Her business will also help your career in the future. I can completely understand you. Emily buried her head in Han Shuo's chest and murmured softly. I promise you, our sneaky days will only be temporary. There will be a day when no one in the entire empire will dare to interfere in my affairs. I will give you what you deserve. Han Shuo promised with a resolute expression. He kissed Emily's body fiercely and carried her to the bedroom. Emily responded to Han Shuo with an unprecedented passion, perhaps wanting to make up for the hidden bitterness she felt this time through intense pleasure. Chapter 177. Han Shuo left on his own after a bout of lovemaking with Emily, heading for the Griffin Legion's weapons warehouse in the west of the city. Through the eyes and ears of the Dark Mantle, Han Shuo had a rough idea of the location of the weapons warehouse. There was no trace of Han Shuo when he moved in the night. After using the art of the demonic ninth heavens to sneak into the weapons warehouse, Han Shuo hid himself in a remote corner and calmly activated his magical yuan, using the demon infant to sense the location of the drop of blood essence. Han Shuo felt the demon infant pulse as he did so, and with a single thought he sensed the exact location of the drop of blood essence. After avoiding the patrolling Griffin Legion soldiers, Han Shuo stopped not far from a low building. Using his bright eyes, Han Shuo discovered that the building was heavily guarded. Apart from the heavily guarded front door, the windowless room was completely sealed off. After observing for a while, Han Shuo calmed his mind and sensed for a bit. He could clearly feel that the drop of blood essence was actually under the house. This meant that there must be a secret chamber in the basement of the house that was specifically used to store items. It was a pity that the Earth Elite Zombie hadn't been born yet. Otherwise, the Earth Elite Zombie would be able to burrow into the ground and explore with the power of the Earth element. Without the Earth Elite Zombie, Han Shuo would have to take care of all the guards at the door if he wanted to go in and see what was going on. Although the guards weren't weak, Han Shuo was still confident that he could take care of them without anyone noticing. However, doing so would definitely alert the enemy, and perhaps the siege equipment would be moved away again. Therefore, after thinking for a while, Han Shuo didn't act rashly and instead retreated back the way he'd come. Within the Dark Mantle stronghold, Han Shuo and Emily met up. They took into account the various factions in Valen City, including Lawrence of the Calamity Church, and carefully assessed Bob Asher's strength. The two furrowed their brows as they began to think of a strategy to deal with Bob Asher. Han Shuo learned from the Dark Mantle that there was a secret room hidden within Bob Asher's mansion. The two of them discussed for a while and were certain that the records of Bob Asher's purchase of siege equipment would be hidden in that secret room. There might also be some other incriminating evidence. After some discussion, they finally decided to sneak into Bob Asher's mansion when he held Clark's funeral the next night. They would make use of the important person in Lawrence's grasp to make the defenses even more lax. They would move away a portion of the people around Bob Asher and use the Calamity Church to assassinate Bob Asher. Han Shuo and Emily would take the opportunity to go to the secret room and see if they could find any useful information. After the general action agenda was decided, Han Shuo and Emily carefully considered some of the problems that they might encounter and came up with countermeasures over and over again. When the two of them felt that it was about time, Han Shuo finally made his move. He went to see Belinda and Lawrence of the Calamity Church and carefully discussed the plan with both sides. Although this matter had something to do with Phoebe, there was no need for Phoebe to help Han Shuo at all. However, when Emily learned from Han Shuo that Phoebe was a swordmaster, she included Phoebe in her plans based on the principle of not letting things go to waste. The reason was that Phoebe had already been implicated and this would be a good way to explain things to her in the future. While Han Shuo was discussing things with Belinda and Lawrence, Emily had also made an appearance to find Phoebe and Candace. No one knew how she persuaded them, but both Phoebe and Candace readily agreed to Emily's invitation and joined the operation this time. When Han Shuo returned to Elaine's hotel from Lawrence's place and was about to find Phoebe, he ran into the great druid Caspian along the way. Han Shuo didn't think much of it and nodded to Caspian, intending to pass him and leave. "Wait a moment." Caspian suddenly called out at this moment. Han Shuo was startled and turned to look at Caspian in confusion. He smiled. "Elder, is there something you need from me?" Nodding with a smile, Caspian said in the hallway, "If you don't mind, can you come with me to my room? I have a favor to ask of you." It was all thanks to Caspian's help last time at Elaine's hotel. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been so easy for Han Shuo to rescue Emily from Belinda's group of 4, much less capture Belinda alive. Han Shuo nodded straightforwardly and said with a smile, "No problem." Han Shuo followed Caspian to the room he was staying in after speaking. There wasn't anything special about this room, but when Han Shuo walked in, he could feel that some of the decorations in the room blossomed with vigorous vitality. "Big scoundrel, why are you here?" The little elf, Angelica, seemed to be meditating on a bed in the room. She opened her bright eyes when she heard the door open and couldn't help but cry out when she saw Han Shuo. "Don't be so rude, Angelica. You need to know how to respect others, or others won't respect you." The druid Caspian glared sternly at Angelica and lectured. "Got it, Grandpa." Angelica stuck out her tongue and made a face at Caspian's scolding, speaking a bit timidly. When they arrived, Han Shuo sat down on a chair in the living room at Caspian's instructions. Angelica didn't continue meditating at this time. She hopped down from the bed and walked into the living room, her bright eyes looking at Han Shuo with great interest. "Elder, do you have any instructions?" Han Shuo sat down and looked at Caspian with a slight smile. "You're too courteous, it's not instructions. I just want to ask you for a favor, but I don't know if it'll be too much trouble for you." Caspian had a benevolent smile on his face as he looked at Han Shuo. Tomorrow night, Han Shuo planned on moving out with Emily and the others. If Caspian wanted to affect Han Shuo's movements, then Han Shuo wouldn't be able to agree. Therefore, Han Shuo said honestly, "Please tell me first. If I can help you, I definitely won't refuse. However, I also have matters to attend to this time and hope that the elder will forgive me if I can't leave." Caspian nodded understandingly when he heard Han Shuo's words. He then mused for a moment and pointed at Angelica. "I'm going out today and will be back by tomorrow at the latest. However, I can't bring Angelica with me. I hope that you can help me take care of Angelica between today and tomorrow and ensure that her safety won't be threatened." Han Shuo wouldn't be moving out until tomorrow night. Han Shuo had already arranged many things. Han Shuo really didn't have anything particularly important to do between today and tomorrow. Even if there were some urgent matters, there were still Emily, Phoebe, and the others who could use them. Therefore, Han Shuo only thought for a moment after Caspian's words and readily agreed. He smiled, "No problem, I really don't have anything important to do at this time. Valen City has been very chaotic recently, so you must be careful if you head out." With Caspian's strength, he must be doing something very dangerous if he insisted on leaving the hotel at this time and couldn't bring Angelica with him. He must be afraid of endangering Angelica's life, which was why he didn't bring her with him. This was why Han Shuo had kindly reminded him, "Grandpa, you must be going to find that enemy for a duel. Take me with you. I've practiced magic for so long, I can help you deal with him." Angelica obviously knew a bit about Caspian. Her little face immediately changed when she heard these words, and she reached out to grab Caspian's arm, begging anxiously. "No, you can't go. A duel is a matter between two people. If I take you with me, it'll be against the rules." Caspian loved Angelica dearly, but he obviously wouldn't budge on this matter. He firmly refused her suggestion. In actuality, Han Shuo understood from Caspian's words and tone that Caspian didn't want to take Angelica with him. That was because he didn't want Angelica to take the risk with him. Saying that it was against the rules was just an excuse for Angelica. But the enemy might not follow the rules. Angelica cried out anxiously and then looked at Han Shuo. She suddenly said, "Although this person is bad, his strength isn't bad. Why don't you let him help you? I'll protect myself." No matter what the other does, Grandpa will never break the rules. "Are you not even going to listen to Grandpa's words?" Caspian's brow furrowed as he glared at Angelica. Angelica and Caspian looked at each other stubbornly for a while and finally gave in. She said with an abnormally worried and tearful face, "Then, you must be careful." "I will." Caspian answered Angelica and then said to Han Shuo, "Then I'll be troubling you." Caspian nodded gratefully at Han Shuo after saying these words and walked towards the door, pushing it open and leaving. Chapter 178. Big Bad Guy, Will My Grandpa Be Alright? As soon as the great druid Caspian left, the little elf Angelica looked at Han Shuo with a heavy expression of worry. Caspian obviously didn't have any helpers in Valen City, otherwise he wouldn't have entrusted Angelica to a stranger like him. If his enemies were in Valen City and didn't fight him according to the rules, then he would be in great danger. However, in order to reassure Angelica, Han Shuo could only smile and say, "Don't worry, your grandpa is so strong he won't be in any danger." Angelica, who had seemed carefree before, suddenly became worried because of her grandfather's matter. Her brows were tightly furrowed, and she suddenly became much quieter. Tomorrow night, Han Shuo would join forces with the other powers to deal with the Griffin Legion. Today was an abnormally important day for Belinda and Lawrence of the Calamity Church. They needed to make use of the resources in their hands and make preparations ahead of time. After staying here for a while, Han Shuo felt that waiting in Angelica's room wasn't a good idea. He thought for a moment and said to the sullen little elf, "Come, let's go play with your sister Candace." "I'm not going anywhere, I'm waiting for my grandpa here." Contrary to Han Shuo's expectations, the playful Angelica didn't pay attention to Han Shuo and instead firmly refused Han Shuo's suggestion. Han Shuo started and said, "You can't stay here either. I think your grandpa will be fine. You can talk to Sister Candace and perhaps she won't be so worried." "I know you want to go see Sister Candace yourself, you big bad guy. You can go if you want, I'm not going." Angelica glared angrily at Han Shuo and snorted, ignoring Han Shuo. Han Shuo didn't know whether to laugh or cry at her words. However, Han Shuo had already promised Caspian. It was true that Valen City hadn't been peaceful during this time, and he really didn't feel comfortable leaving her here alone. He didn't want Caspian's enemies to seize the opportunity to threaten him. Seeing Angelica's stubborn expression, Han Shuo muttered to himself for a moment before fiercely saying, "I don't care if you're willing or not. In any case, I promised your grandfather that you wouldn't leave my side." Before Angelica could react to these words, Han Shuo's body dashed forward like a bolt of lightning. He suddenly stood by Angelica's side and extended his left arm, grabbing Angelica's body. His left hand exerted force, and Angelica was lifted into the air by Han Shua's iron claw-like arm. "Let go, you big bastard, big pervert, let go of me." By the time Angelica came to her senses, she discovered that she could no longer move her body. Her two little feet kept kicking about as she angrily cursed and complained. Han Shua paid no attention to Angelica's cries at all. He opened the door to the room with her body in his grasp and walked directly to Candace's room. Han Shua discovered that Angelica was still yelling as soon as he walked out of the room. In order to prevent her from attracting too much attention, Han Shua extended his right hand and covered Angelica's little mouth. Angelica's loud cries then turned into low whimpers, as if she was being held hostage by Han Shua. "Put her down!" Just as Han Shua was about to reach Candace's room, a few people from the Battlefire mercenary band suddenly walked out from the two sides of Candace's room. They looked at Han Shua with unkind expressions, and one of them, a burly swordsman with short, steel needle-like hair and a sword on his back, shouted coldly at Han Shua. "Isn't he the one who spoke with the vice chief outside the city?" One of the journeyman mages recognized Han Shua with a glance and said in surprise, "No matter what relationship he has with the vice chief, his actions of taking a girl hostage in public has angered me. I can't just watch him take that pitiful little elf away." The burly senior swordsman spoke very righteously and glared at Han Shua with his bell-like eyes. He slowly took out a long sword from his back and pointed it at Han Shua. Han Shua was speechless. Candace's room door was also opened at this time, and a confused Candace and Phoebe walked out. The two didn't know what had happened, and their eyes focused on Han Shua. It was Candace who asked with surprise, "What's wrong, Brian? Why did you grab little Angelica?" "Nothing much. Her grandfather has gone out on business and asked me to protect her. I just want to make sure that she'll always stay by my side." Han Shua shrugged and responded easily. "Davis, this is just a misunderstanding. Don't be so nervous." Candace laughed lightly and spoke to the burly senior swordsman. "His words are useless. Only that beautiful elf girl's words can prove his innocence." For some reason, Davis was still quite stubborn after hearing Candace's words. His large eyes stared blankly at the little elf Angelica whose mouth had been covered by Han Shua. Han Shua immediately released the hand covering Angelica's mouth when he spoke and said to Angelica, "All right, stop messing around. Tell him that I only want to protect you." Angelica's clear curses once again rang out when Han Shua released his hand. She glared angrily at Han Shua and said hatefully, "Big bad guy, you're holding me hostage, you're holding me hostage." Davis flew into a rage when Angelica's words left her mouth. He pointed the long sword in his hand at Han Shua and said righteously, "Release her immediately or you'll regret it." "All right, Davis, can't you see that Angelica is just messing around? If there's nothing else, why don't you go back to your room and recover your strength? Don't meddle in matters that have nothing to do with you." Candace's face grew cold and looked quite imposing. Her bright eyes widened as she glared angrily at Davis. Perhaps Davis was used to Candace's berating, but he seemed to be a bit timid at first. However, when he looked at Angelica, courage came out of nowhere and he stuck out his chest, saying, "Madam Candace, if your suggestion is wrong, I won't listen." Han Shua was quite amused at this moment. Han Shua discovered that there was a different kind of heat in Davis's gaze when he looked at Angelica. Han Shua's heart moved and he already had an idea of what was going on. Chuckling strangely, Han Shua said, "So that's how it is. It looks like this brave mercenary wants to be a hero in front of the little beauty. Perhaps he has other thoughts in mind." Candace and Phoebe, as well as the mercenaries on the side, all looked at Davis strangely after these words were spoken. Even the little elf Angelica was startled and looked at Davis with a bit of astonishment. At this moment, Davis's face reddened and he awkwardly defended himself. "No, no such thing." Han Shua loosened his grip on Angelica and put her down. He spread his hands and said, "All right, I won't continue to hold you hostage. There's a hero here who wants to save the damsel in distress, so I'll fulfill his wish. Little Angelica, you've already been saved. Let your hero save you, I won't bother with you anymore." After saying these words, Han Shuo walked towards Candace and Phoebe with a relaxed expression. He didn't even look at Angelica, as if he'd completely forgotten what he'd promised her grandfather. Hello, you're safe now. Davis walked towards Angelica at this moment and spoke with a bit of a disdainful tone in contrast to his previous righteous attitude towards Han Shuo. What does that have to do with you, big dumb bear? I'm happy to be held hostage by him, what can you do about it? Angelica suddenly panicked when she saw that Han Shuo wasn't paying attention to her. When she saw Davis walking over with a licking face, her instincts made her angry no matter how she looked at it. She immediately opened her mouth to speak angrily. The expression on Davis's face suddenly became quite peculiar, as if someone had stepped on his face with a dirty shoe. There was an unspeakable bitterness and embarrassment. Big bad guy, you promised my grandfather that you'd take care of me. You're not allowed to leave. After yelling at Davis, the little elf Angelica lifted her little flower dress and sprinted towards Han Shuo. She shouted loudly as she ran, as if she was afraid that Han Shuo would ignore her. As for Davis, he didn't even spare him a glance. Candace glared at Davis when she saw that he was still standing there with a wry smile on his face. She said unhappily, "Get back to your room and don't embarrass me. If you want to be a hero and save a damsel in distress, you should first see clearly if the beauty is willing to be captured by the devil. You don't know anything and just randomly save her. You deserve to make a fool of yourself." When Candace said these words, the shame-faced Davis let out a long sigh and walked back to his room with his tail between his legs. This kind of matter was indeed a bit complicated for his brain. Even now, he still couldn't understand why Angelica, who'd had a face full of indignation and unwillingness just a moment ago, had turned into a pitiful begging when Han Shuo let go of her and left in a carefree and unrestrained manner. Chapter 179. Angelica finally followed Han Shuo into Candace's room. Han Shuo chatted with Candace and Phoebe for a while, learning that Emily had gone out to take care of business. With Candace and Phoebe here, Han Shuo didn't need to worry about Angelica's safety. He excused himself with business and returned to his room, silently practicing another high-level necromancy magic, hate warrior summoning. With Clarendon's many years of memories and Han Shuo's unyielding spirit, he finally grasped the art of summoning a hate warrior after a few hours of torment. He summoned a hate warrior wielding a metal rod from the other dimension to his front. This hate warrior's summoning consumed quite a bit of Han Shuo's mental strength. He meditated for a while and felt his mental strength rapidly recover. He then used the transportation matrix to return to the cemetery of death. "Evil master, shouldn't you be taking me out of here this time?" Gilbert started yelling loudly when Han Shuo appeared. "That's right, I'm really going to take you out of here this time," Han Shuo said with a smile when he saw Gilbert walk over dejectedly. When he heard that he could leave the cemetery of death, the dejection on Gilbert's face was instantly replaced by excitement, and a string of flattery flowed out. "All right, make your preparations. We'll be leaving in a bit." Han Shuo said impatiently and quickly walked to the place where he was refining the Earth Elite Zombie. He discovered that the Earth Chi was flowing more and more slowly towards the center. It looked like all the Earth Chi in the Cemetery of Death was about to be absorbed by the Earth Elite Zombie that was about to evolve. On the other side of the Demon Cave, the Wraiths were still fighting and devouring each other, fighting over the 3 drops of blood essence that Han Shuo had dropped. Because his strength had already reached the true demon realm, Han Shuo's demonic yuan had already undergone a qualitative change. Coupled with the support of 3 drops of blood essence, he could maintain the Demon Cave for a long time. Han Shuo didn't need to inject demonic yuan every day like when he was refining the original demons. Seeing that everything was normal in the Cemetery of Death, Han Shuo didn't continue to stay here. After giving the little lewd dragon Gilbert a few reminders, he left with him. After returning to Elaine's hotel, Han Shuo let Gilbert stay in the room while he practiced his demonic arts for the whole night, adjusting his state to its peak. On the afternoon of the second day, Han Shuo shut himself in his room and ordered Gilbert not to take a single step out. In a single day, Han Shuo had mastered the advanced necromancy magic, Corpse Explosion. When it was almost evening, Gilbert couldn't bear it any longer and yelled at Han Shuo, "What the hell is this place? I've been staying here ever since I came out of that place. I'm about to get sick from the boredom." Han Shuo, who was meditating, suddenly breathed a sigh of relief and opened his deep eyes. He looked at Gilbert. "All right, we'll leave this place immediately. When we leave, shut up for the rest of the journey and do whatever I want you to do. If you dare act on your own, I'll leave you in the cemetery of death forever." What are we doing tonight?" "Ah, honored master, don't worry, I won't be a burden to you." Gilbert immediately responded with great excitement when he heard Han Shuo's words. Footsteps sounded from outside at this moment, and then Emily's voice sounded from outside. "Are you inside?" When he heard that it was Emily, Han Shuo immediately stood up and opened the door. "How is it? Has everything been settled?" Emily's beautiful figure was revealed when the door opened. Gilbert's eyes lit up and he suddenly whistled, saying excitedly, "A beauty, a great beauty." "Shut up." Han Shuo turned his head and glared fiercely at Gilbert. Gilbert didn't dare open his mouth after being scolded by Han Shuo, but his eyes darted shiftily at Emily and then looked at Han Shuo with a face full of envy. "Who's he?" Emily didn't know of Gilbert's existence and couldn't help but ask Han Shuo in surprise when she saw him suddenly appear next to Han Shuo. "He's one of us, there won't be any problems. He'll move with us and his strength will be of great help to us," Han Shuo explained. Although Gilbert was only a young dark dragon, he possessed great destructive power when he transformed into a dragon. If a dark dragon appeared at a critical juncture, it would greatly increase the safety of Han Shuo and the others. Emily never doubted Han Shuo's words. Gilbert's appearance only gave Emily a deeper understanding of Han Shuo's mysteriousness, and she didn't question Han Shuo's methods. The great druid Caspian hasn't returned yet, and the little elf Angelica is very worried. This time, it's not related to the Battlefire mercenary band, so apart from Candace, no one else knows of our identities or our movements. When we first arrived, Candace temporarily entrusted Angelica to the other members of the Battlefire mercenary band to look after her. That senior swordsman named Davis seemed very happy to do it, so you don't have to worry about Angelica's safety. It looked like Emily must have heard about the small friction between her and Davis from Phoebe and Candace, which was why she'd said this to Han Shuo. "Alright, since that's the case, let's leave." Han Shuo thought for a moment and said, the fact that the great druid Caspian still hadn't returned meant that something must have happened. However, Han Shuo didn't have a deep relationship with Caspian and naturally wouldn't delay the important matters that he'd been planning for so long for Caspian. Bob Asher, who wasn't young anymore, had lost 2 sons in a row in the span of a few months. This matter had greatly affected him. As the true master of Valen City, Clark's death still required a funeral according to the rules. All sorts of luxurious carriages were parked in front of Asher's manor. None of the people with status in Valen City dared not give face at this time. No matter how busy they were at home, they still took the time to comfort old Asher's wounded heart. "So we're here to attend the funeral." Gilbert stood in a remote corner in front of the door and stood shoulder to shoulder with Han Shuo and Emily, complaining with flagging interest. "No, we're here to cause trouble." Han Shuo chuckled lowly and said, "If you successfully complete the mission today, I'll reward you with a few things. Work hard." When he heard that they were here to cause trouble and that there might even be a reward tonight, Gilbert's spirits immediately rose again. He laughed heartily and wanted to walk inside, but Han Shuo grabbed him back. "Since we're here to cause trouble, of course we can't go through the front door, idiot." Han Shuo chided Gilbert with a bad temper and nodded at Emily. The 3 circled around and arrived at the other side of the manor where there was no one. Even some of the important corners of Asher's manor are protected by magic barriers. However, there shouldn't be any problems going through from here, but we still need to be careful. "I'll go up and take a look." Emily spoke softly and used the levitation spell that only archmages could grasp to slowly rise into the air. She landed on top of the high wall and looked around, gesturing to Han Shuo. "Can you still fly?" Han Shuo was about to move when he glanced at Gilbert and asked. Shaking his head, Gilbert said honestly, Unless I return to my original state, I won't be able to fly over. You've become a burden from the start. Han Shuo looked at Gilbert with disdain and reached out to grab him by the neck. He used the art of the demonic ninth heavens to bring him into the air and landed next to Emily with a whoosh, landing shoulder to shoulder with Emily. The group of 3 flew down from the high wall, with Han Shuo and Gilbert following behind Emily. They passed through 2 corridors and a rock garden before appearing in the lively area of the manor with their usual expressions. The 3 of them had changed their clothes long before they'd arrived. Emily had smeared some magical medicine on her face and her entire appearance had changed greatly. Even Han Shuo almost didn't recognize her. The 3 of them walked into the crowd and appeared to be dressed the same as the other guests in the manor. Therefore, they didn't stand out too much and no one made trouble for them. Wow, so many women, so many beautiful women. Gilbert was a bit excited as his eyes roamed about lecherously. He called out to Han Shuo beside him in a low voice. Watch your image, Gilbert. Han Shuo cursed lowly as his eyes also roamed about. He suddenly saw Belinda and Johnny of the Calamity Church appear in the crowd. Lawrence, who'd changed his appearance using magical medicine, was also mixed in with the crowd. He even waved at Han Shuo when he saw Han Shuo appear. Phoebe and Candace had been arranged by Emily to stay in another place. If the Calamity Church made a move, they would cooperate and set fire to the surroundings, planning on throwing the manor into complete chaos. Add to that the changes to the defenses of Lawrence's trusted aides, the manor's defenses would be at their most lax. Han Shuo and Emily would then take the opportunity to investigate Asher's secret room. Welcome to Immortal Cultivation Audiobooks, your gateway to the mystical world of Xianxia. Dive into legendary tales of martial arts, spiritual growth, and immortal ascension. Here, we bring you full-length English audiobooks of the best Wuxia and Xianxia stories, from young prodigies to ancient sect wars. Perfect for fans of Against the Gods, Martial World, and tales of demons and gods.